So today I'm going to talk about 5 unique capital raising strategies you can use to increase your assets under management. I know a few of you here work in large investment banks and banks, a couple of family offices, and a lot of hedge fund managers, obviously. So everything I talk about here today is something that I think can apply to all three types of businesses. I'm currently on a multi-year contract working with an investment bank in the U.S., a publicly traded investment bank. I've also helped family offices raise capital, but most of my experience is in raising capital for hedge fund managers. A quick disclaimer, just that if you're based in Singapore or Hong Kong or Japan or somewhere else, obviously the regulations are different. So what I'm providing here are things that work for me, that I've had success in raising capital with. Trying to keep all theory or kind of good ideas out of the presentation, only including practical advice, but also, where you're based is going to change, how much of this you can actually do. So obviously check with compliance before actually using the advice. So first off, you can see my bio there in the handout, so I'm not going to spend much time on this, but just so you know where I'm coming from. My experience first started by getting contracts with an investment bank and the South African fund to fund. I tried to raise capital for them, introduce them to some institutional investors, but I wasn't very good at it. It was my first time raising capital. After that, I moved to Boston, and I worked for several years for a third-party marketing firm, which is basically a capital-raising consulting firm, which takes a share of capital that they raise. And after working there, it was interesting because at first it was very challenging, obviously, to raise capital for any hedge fund. We had an $800 million fund-to-fund client, a $3 million hedge fund client, and a $15 million long-only separate managed account product that we were marketing. And the first 12 or 13 months I was marketing those funds, I didn't raise a dime, and we were calling 40 or 60 different investors every day, lots of cold calls, lots of marketing emails, a lot of work without raising any capital. Eventually, after 12, 13, 14 months, we started raising $100,000 a week, $400,000 a week here and there. And after about 18 months, we were steadily bringing in about $1 million a week in new capital. And eventually we got to an average of $2 to $4 million a week, depending on the week. And all that selling was done at conferences. A lot of it was done through the phone and email. And it was all done basically through a lot of hard work and learning things the hard way. And that's kind of what I'm going to share here today. In 2005, 2006, I started the hedge fund group. We now have actually 50,000 members around the world. It's free to join, but we are the largest hedge fund association in the world with those 50,000 members. From that, we started the Certified Hedge Fund Professional designation, which is a professional certification that hedge fund professionals can earn. To my knowledge today, it's still the only hedge fund, it's only the only professional designation exclusively focused for hedge fund professionals and built by hedge fund professionals, our team. And so far, I've had over 1,000 people complete that program. And before I get started, I just want to make it clear what I'm not. I'm not an analyst, not a portfolio manager, not an expert on managing risk. But I am pretty good at raising capital. I know a lot about marketing and capital raising techniques. So I can definitely answer any questions you have related to those areas at the end. Here's my book on the left, which over 100,000 people have downloaded. And the book on the right is a published book through Wiley that I published last year. The one on the left is free. If you wanted to get it, it's just hedgefunds.book.com. The one on the right, basically I interviewed 24 different hedge fund managers and capital raising experts and put all of those interview transcripts into book form. So basically it's like you're sitting down for a lunch meeting with 24 different hedge fund experts, and you get to read those conversations about what helps them in growing their hedge fund, how they raise capital, etc. So first I want to start with the bad news and then start with some advice and strategies that actually work. The bad news is that lots of times when we do these types of events or workshops in the United States, people come and they're really excited to come because they want to find out what that capital raising strategy is, what the secret is raising capital. Maybe they've been having a hard time raising their assets under management. But the bad news is there's no one secret. There's no 3 people you go to and they help you raise all the capital you need. It's never that easy. And one of my favorite quotes, I believe it's by Brian Tracy, is that if you want to have what others don't, you must do what others won't. So what I found in the hedge fund industry is that to raise capital, you have to do the hard work that other people might not do. You have to go, the full 100% to 70 or 80% when following up with investors, or just doing the hard work needed to position your fund right. And basically, here's a quote by Muhammad Ali: "I hated every minute of training, but I said don't quit, suffer now, and live the rest of your life as a champion." And I put that up there because I think that lots of people see hedge funds growing quickly and raising a lot of capital, and they're not sure how they did it. I think people look at someone like Muhammad Ali and say, wow, he's the most talented boxer of all time. But it almost does him a disservice to say that he was just naturally talented and that's why he was so great. Because he's saying right here that he worked very, very hard, and that's how he became so great. So in my experience, 1 out of 100 people that are good at raising capital are naturally talented at it. Most people that are good at it work very hard for a very long time to figure out how to do it. So there's 5 capital raising strategies I'm going to share with you today. The title of my speech was 5 unique capital raising strategies, so I hope that at least 3 out of these 5 you either haven't seen before or haven't really thought about explicitly enough to really take advantage of it in your hedge fund or raising capital for your investment bank, family office. So these are strategies that I know that work because I've used them to raise capital. Like I said at the beginning, I wasn't able to raise any capital, and I was making 40, 50, 60 phone calls a day to investors, and I still wasn't able to raise capital. So I had to change what I was doing, and these are some of the strategies that I found worked. The first one is copywriting for capital raising. This one can be confusing. I'm not speaking about copywriting in terms of protecting your information or your intellectual property. I'm not talking about anything legal or trademark related. Here, copywriting is referring to persuasive writing. It's referring to writing to get somebody to take action, writing so that people actually read your newsletter or read your email and actually respond to you. And that's what I'm referring to as copywriting. The second one is educational marketing. Most of you are probably already doing this on some level, but I'm going to provide some tips and strategies for improving that. Third is becoming the scarce authority celebrity in your niche or your asset class or investment strategy. The next is investor avatar domination, doing well in your marketplace by having a very clear avatar of who you're trying to raise capital from. And the last is one of my favorite business principles and marketing principles, which is speed of implementation. And that will kind of summarize everything we've talked about here today and try to get you to actually benefit from it in raising capital. And I just want to mention real quick that the goal here the next 45 minutes here while I'm speaking with you is hopefully to give you at least one idea that you can write down, take home with you, take back to your office, and will either save you $10,000 worth of time and lost opportunity or make you at least $10,000 in the benefits of these capital raising strategies. So that's kind of my mission here in the next 40 minutes, to give you at least one idea that serves that purpose. So the first idea is copywriting for capital raising. As I mentioned, copywriting here is persuasive writing. The definition of copywriting is the science and art of persuasive writing to get the reader to take action. So the whole point of studying copywriting is to get more people that read your marketing materials and your emails, your newsletters, to actually take action. If you send an email to an investor, how often in this industry do people get excited and then call you as soon as they get your email? Not very often. Usually the email just kind of warms up the fact you're going to be calling them soon, or you might just be scheduling a meeting, so you get the email very short and concise. Many emails in this industry go unread or deleted or go to the spam box directly, and I'm going to give you a couple strategies for avoiding that. But first off, a good, I guess, story of seeing why copywriting is so powerful is if you think about a $1 bill and a $100 bill, or a 1,000 yen and 10,000 yen, which I've been getting confused the last couple days. The difference is really the message on the paper. It's made out of the same type of paper, it's the same size of paper. Really the only difference between the 1,000 yen and 10,000 yen is that message printed on the paper. The paper is the same, but it's worth 10 times more in that case. Or in the $1 bill and $100 bill, it's worth 100 times more because of the message on the paper. So if you hand a one-pager marketing sheet to an investor, just because you have a marketing sheet doesn't mean the investor is going to think that your fund is very institutional and high quality. The message on the paper, what the words you actually use on the paper, can change the value of that one-page marketing sheet by 100-fold. And I think this is a really important point to get. because this can seem like, well, obviously it's important to write something nice, to write something persuasive. But most people don't realize that your whole life you could study copywriting and not learn everything about it. There's people that do that for their entire career. They do nothing but learn how to write more persuasively. You know, what I found is that I've worked personally with over 500 different hedge fund managers, and I've never found a single one that has a copywriter on their team or that's gone out and hired a copywriter. Most of them have hired a graphical design artist. Most of them have a risk manager on their team. But in raising capital, most people don't even think about copywriting. So I thought it would be a good one to include first as a unique capital raising strategy, because I found that almost nobody does this. And you know, the difference between a $1 bill and a $10 bill, or $1 bill and $100 bill, when you come down to investments, whether somebody invests $1 million or $100 million, you know, they make a huge difference, obviously, in the amount of capital that you raise. And I just wanted to, you know, reinforce, you know, look at your own marketing materials and think about how much time was spent in compliance and how much capital that helped you raise. It's good to have a great compliance firm or expert on your team. But you're probably sunk a lot of money and time to compliance. Also, in terms of graphic design, you know, have you spent $3,000 or $10,000 in graphic design? You know, how much money have you spent on persuasive writing? Usually the answer is zero. The good news is that the answer for everybody else is zero as well. So the nature of the business I found in Singapore, and this is my first time actually to Tokyo, but in Europe and the United States, is that people start hedge funds because they're experts at raising, or they're experts at managing risk, they're experts at portfolio management, and most often they're experts at trading. They're great traders, and that's how the people around them supported them to start their hedge fund in the first place, or they came out of the bank and started a hedge fund. They're naturally great at managing assets and risk, not at raising capital. So that's really an advantage if you use some of these strategies. You're already moving ahead of 50% of your competitors out there, because most of them are focused on great returns, and they're hoping that if they build a track record, the investors will come. And nowadays, I just don't think that's true. Lots of people have great track records. In fact, one of the managers I used to represent as a capital marketer had a 7-year track record, and they had waited until 6 years of having a track record before they tried to raise any capital. And their thinking was that if they build a great track record first, they'll be able to raise a lot of capital, you know, right away. The capital is just going to flow in once they hit that 5-year mark or 7-year mark of the track record. But it just didn't happen with them, and that's why we were retained. And it's actually even worse than that. It's worse than it sounds, because what happens when you wait for the long track record is that you don't move up the learning curve of getting your marketing materials in line, getting a master due diligence questionnaire in place, learning how to speak with investors and do conference calls, etc. A couple tips for how to actually practically use copywriting in your marketing and capital raising. The first is in the subject line of your email. There was a study by Marketing Sherpa in 2004 which showed that people will open emails from you 30% more often if you use their first name in the subject line of the email. That alone will catch their attention and make them read at least a little bit of your email and see what it's about, because they know it's not complete spam. Somebody at least use your first name. If you use their first and last name, you want to be a little bit more informal. Certain types of investors. This study was done on business professionals and on consumers, not in the hedge fund industry. So if you want to be a little bit more informal, they showed a 20% open increase when you use their first and last name. So that's just one really small change where you just do that from now on. It can be an instant increase in the number of people who are aware of your fund or the benefits of working with you. The headline of your newsletter, which is the very first kind of title of a newsletter, or the very first sentence of your email, or what's written at the very top of your website or the top of your PowerPoint slide is the very most important. If that doesn't catch their attention and look very interesting and engaging, they're not going to read anything else on that page. So it's really important, if you're not going to spend much time on this, at least focus on the subject lines of your emails and the title pages of your PowerPoints and the top of your newsletter, because otherwise people typically won't read anything else. They'll just skim through it very quickly or skip it altogether. And the next thing, often referred to in copywriting, is called the hook. And the hook is what comes right after the headline. So if your newsletter has a headline at the top which says kind of the unique benefit of investing in your fund, for example, the super funds expert is just up here. If his newsletter said what their unique benefit was, and having exposure to gold or being uncorrelated with stocks, that you'd want to put that, possibly as one of the main headlines, but then the hook would be the first sentence under that, which maybe shows how experienced they are, that they have a 15-year track record or something like that. So the hook is what gets them into the rest of what you wrote on your newsletter. The last thing I want to provide here that's been really useful in my experience is using aweber.com or automatic email updates for your newsletters or for information you send out to potential investors. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that today, so not much time, but if you're curious, aweber.com is the website. This helps you keep in touch with your potential or current investors more systematically. If you have great educational material on, say, investing in gold, your type of hedge fund strategy, you can be pushing that out automatically to potential investors so that you keep closer with them and more helpful to them. Also, I found in writing copy or writing your PowerPoint or newsletter, telling stories is very effective. Telling stories is a way that you can sell who you are and what you're offering without explicitly selling. People don't really like to be sold to, but they like to buy things that solve their problems and that help them get past the challenges they're facing. So telling stories is a great thing to do. I know that most of us have never gone through training on how to tell a great story or how to format the history of your fund to make it look like a story instead of a sales pitch. So there's kind of a format that you can steal from the movie and film industry called The Hero's Journey. If you haven't heard this before, it's a type of storyline that's used in many different movies, such as Indiana Jones, Star Wars, the recent hit Avatar. All those movies use the hero's journey storyline. So if somebody's looking to write a story, if you're looking to write a story, you can just kind of steal this format and your story will come off more powerful and natural. So for example, in most stories, there's a hero who doesn't even know he's a hero. He's mostly an average person who gets called upon to do something. Oftentimes he says, no thank you, or it's not a good fit for me, or I can't do that. He gets called upon again and gets dragged into it, either by some sort of family or national crisis or something makes him do it and start facing some challenge. The challenge or the evil in the story gets personified by a single individual or company eventually, and it gets worse and worse, and eventually the hero overcomes the challenge and he's now the hero. So the story about how your firm was started could be turned into this hero's journey format. For example, you could start about how you worked inside of a bank on a trading desk, and maybe you were trading gold or commodities, and eventually one of your clients, maybe from a family office division, asked how you were able to produce such returns, and that high net worth person brought you to manage their own portfolio on the side, gave you a job to manage his wealth, and then maybe it did so well, other family offices were asking how you were able to produce such returns, so the family office formed a hedge fund. And over time, you're able to fight the evil would be the unpredictable market in this place. And you're able to manage the portfolio using your trading algorithm or your models and do very well eventually and come out on top. And now you have this great system you've been running for 7 or 10 years. So the trick is to tell where you came from, the genuine honest story of your background, and then what your challenge was as you started the hedge fund or started your investment bank and family office, and then how you moved from there to figuring everything out and doing very well. One last tip, though, is to provide your picture and signature within all of your emails. Scientific studies have also shown that if you include just a sentence or two on your bio within all of your communications, especially emails, people will trust the message more and respond more often. So oftentimes people might not recognize your name. So having your picture, signature, and maybe a 1 or 2 sentence bio can be really effective in getting your marketing materials and messages read more often. The second tip I want to share is educational marketing. This is the second strategy for raising capital. This is really important because there's a study done in 2007 of institutional investors, and it showed that 78% of institutional investors will not invest in something unless they understand how it works. So if your trading algorithms or model or your investment process, it might be very robust, it might have every risk management tool and trick in the book included in it, but if they don't understand what you're doing or how you earn your returns or how you are managing risk in your portfolio, typically they won't invest. So having educational marketing materials in place that educate investors on the specific types of risks dealing with your asset class, on the specific types of risks dealing with your hedge fund investment strategy, or maybe just dealing with investing in a hedge fund in general. Those are all really important things to have in place. just for the fact that if they don't understand exactly what you're doing, at least on the 1,000-foot level, they're not going to invest with you. So it's really important, if I wasn't speaking about anything else on this topic, just that alone is important enough to put together at least some basic educational marketing materials. And I believe most of you probably already have that in place. What I'm hoping here is provide some extra examples of how you can have better educational marketing materials than other hedge funds in the industry. After today, if you wanted to go home and watch a video that I recorded on the same topic, I will have a free video you can watch at hedgefundtraining.com/educational. And the E on the educational has to be capitalized or it won't come up. But there's some extra video content there, stuff that we don't have time to cover here today. But some of the other educational marketing opportunities out there that I've seen other managers do, that I've used myself to raise capital, is one, the most common, is to have a folder of white papers, quotes, articles, and studies done in your industry. The good news is you don't have to write all these articles and white papers. I think it's much more effective if you can eventually, or if someone on your team can, or if you can speak with somebody who's great at writing and can ghost write it or write it for you in your voice with your thoughts. But having at least a folder of educational materials is definitely something you should have in place. Having a book or a workbook I found to be very effective. This is something that almost nobody does. There are several dozen hedge fund managers out there who have written books now. But for example, one of the reasons why I wrote the book on capital raising last year through Wiley was because if you search on a book website or if you go to a bookstore and you look for a book on hedge fund capital raising or hedge fund marketing, you'll find there's exactly 0 books out there on that topic. This book I wrote last year is actually the first book on that topic. And the same goes probably for your investment strategy or your very specific asset class. How many people have actually taken the time to share their knowledge of managing risk in your industry or asset class and publish that in a book? Most people say, no, that's my secret knowledge. That's our competitive advantage. I can't give that away. But if nobody knows you have that knowledge, then nobody's going to come to you and invest in your fund. You're going to have to constantly be reaching out to investors. So if you want to reverse the flow of investors and energy of you having to cold call investors and if investors come to you, then you basically have to give away more educational material than your competitors. If your competitors only have a newsletter in a thin folder of educational materials, which mostly consists of their own pitch book and a one-page newsletter, then you need to probably look around and think about how you can give away twice as much. So you look twice as genuinely authoritative. You look like twice the expert as the other hedge fund that they met with the hour before you. You look like you have maybe twice the knowledge or experience, or twice the credibility. So you just have to, I think it's something really challenging, especially for hedge fund managers who've been in business for a few years. They feel like they have so much that's proprietary and people are going to be looking to them to copy what they're doing. But I believe that anyone that's has to look around and copy what other hedge funds are doing in their industry constantly are always going to be a few steps behind you. In my experience, every financial model and portfolio gets refined and adjusted, and everything gets more granular every year that you're in business. So I don't really think this is much of a risk. I don't know if, I've probably presented this 20 or 30 times at different workshops and conferences. This might be one of the most powerful ideas that's pretty straightforward to execute, but maybe one of the less followed because it takes some of the most hard work and it's a little bit, it'd be controversial. If you have an investment partner, he might not agree to doing this and the conversation might last 30 seconds. Another form of educational marketing is obviously your pitch book. Another form would be recorded speeches. I actually have my video camera running in the back right here recording this speech. And that's something I would suggest that you do whenever you speak, so that if somebody asks to learn more about you, you can send them a link. Probably has to be within a password-protected website or on a disk. You might even have to track who you give access to for compliance reasons. But it can be very powerful. I don't think very many managers, hedge fund managers or family offices have been asked to speak at conferences as a percentage of the total industry. So showing that you have, even if somebody watches only 5 or 10 minutes of it, it could be really useful and kind of sets you apart from the competition. The last tip here in terms of educational marketing is I think this can be the most powerful when working with small, medium, wealth management firms as well as family offices. The reason is, I found is that especially medium-sized wealth management firms that are growing quickly, they realize that if they can help their relationship managers attract more high net worth and ultra high net worth clients, that their total assets under management is going to go up very quickly and they're going to be more profitable. They also realize that if you can make a fee split agreement with the wealth management firm, oftentimes the fees on an ETF or variable annuity or a mutual fund don't compare to the fees you could split with them on something that you're probably offering in the alternative investment space. So they can be more profitable on a per asset basis and potentially attract more high net worth and ultra high net worth clients to their wealth management firm by partnering with hedge funds, possibly like yourself. To make this even more in demand, educational marketing to this sector, is that most wealth management firms that I've worked with that are small and medium sized, although they have some high net worth clients, they don't really have one person who does nothing but evaluate external managers. If you've sold to institutional investors and family offices, they do typically have one or two institutional consultants, as well as maybe one or two at least internal analysts or external portfolio manager analysts. But what I found is the small and medium-sized wealth management firms are hungry to learn how they can include hedge funds in their client portfolios, but they don't really have one or two dedicated people in-house, or they haven't hired an institutional consulting firm to help them with those decisions. So they really can use your educational help and advice and direction there. And that's where I've had the most success with this. I'll share a story about this later on, make it a bit more practical and straightforward, but I've had a lot of success in using educational marketing in this space. And it's one of the things that kind of moved me past raising only $100,000 or $200,000 a week to over $1 million a week. This is actually a picture of Michael Jordan's McLaren that he was selling last year. And I put this up here because I'm talking about now a unique hedge fund capital raising strategy called the scarce authority celebrity. And the point here is to turn yourself into the scarce authority celebrity. And when you think of something scarce that somebody could look at and buy or invest in, it doesn't get much more scarce than a supercar that Michael Jordan owned. So that's why I put that up there. And the definition of scarcity, which comes from the field of influence and persuasion, the definition of scarcity is that people will find things more valuable when they're in limited supply, and especially when there's a time-based limit on a resource. So for example, the last speaker here is talking about how gold, in 10 or 12 years might be more expensive to find or to dig out of the ground. Obviously, everybody in the room naturally knew that once that happens, then the price of gold potentially could rise because if it's more scarce, then the demand stays equal, the value of gold is going to rise. So that's how scarcity works. Everybody's pretty familiar with that, I think. Authority is another influence and persuasion principle. And the principle of authority says that the more authoritative and credible you are in your industry or in the eyes of your potential clients, then the more people will listen to what you say, trust it, and take action based on your recommendation. So the higher degree of authority you have, the more influence you'll have with the investors that you meet face-to-face with. The great thing about this is that no matter how much authority you currently have, you can always increase it. And there's really practical ways that really don't cost much money to increase your authority. And the reason I call this authority celebrity is that if you become authoritative enough in your asset class, in your hedge fund investment strategy, in your industry, or in your local kind of financial community, investors will come to you instead of you having to call investors. And I think that's the most powerful position to be in while raising capital that probably only 1% of hedge funds get to. Most hedge funds get there by having $1 billion plus in assets under management. So lots of small hedge fund managers struggle to raise capital because the large ones have authority by being so large. But there's many ways you can grow your authority before your assets have grown. So obviously you have to do that somehow. So this is one way through which you can do that. And I just want to point out that the whole field of influence and persuasion sometimes has a bad reputation. It can almost seem like trying to coerce somebody or manipulate somebody to doing something. I think especially the word persuasion sounds like you're trying to be slick or sell somebody something they don't want. But really, the whole science behind it, and the 40 years of scientific research at universities behind influence and persuasion, is really how to effectively communicate with others. So it's somewhat related to copywriting, but it has to do with everything that you do. Your body language, the clothing you wear, the way you speak, the places you go, your professional bio, everything about you is communicating something. And influence and persuasion is the whole study of effective communication with the idea of gaining compliance in mind. So with the idea of gaining action on the person you're trying to speak with and getting them to take action on what you're suggested. So really it's a tool, influence and persuasion. It's not good or evil, it's just a tool to be used for really any type of communication. One of the reasons why scarcity works is because people are more afraid of losing something rather than gaining something. If people have a choice, they'd rather protect what they have, in many cases, rather than gain something. That's true pretty universally. I think it's true with many investors as well, especially in today's environment. I think capital preservation is definitely something that almost all investors have at the top of their list. One thing I mentioned here on the slide is USP, which stands for Unique Selling Proposition. And the reason why I call this strategy the scarce authority celebrity strategy is because if you come up with a unique selling proposition that other hedge fund managers in the industry don't have, and it's truly unique, and you also are very authoritative, you yourself will become a scarce resource in the industry. When an investor is looking at who to spend time with, when they're interviewing managers face-to-face, when they're scheduling conference calls, they don't want to waste their time, obviously. And if you offer something unique, and at the same time you're very knowledgeable, well-respected in the industry, well-experienced, most people believe, if you publish a book or two, you must know something about that topic. People can publish a book if they didn't know anything, so it adds a lot of credibility to who you are. People will meet with you more often. And even though that sounds very simple, I know from first-hand experience that probably 50 or 60% of sales professionals' time in the hedge fund industry is spent sending emails and leaving voicemails that will never be returned. And that is because there are so many people trying to raise capital from a smaller institutional investor base. That's just naturally how the industry is right now. So while this seems very simple, it's very important, and it can, if you lower that percentage by just 5 or 10%, it could mean the difference of raising enough capital to stay in business, or enough capital that you get bought out by a large bank or asset manager. It could mean that difference. And that's one interesting thing about a few of these strategies is if you think about some of them, individually it might only give you a 3% or 1% or 5% advantage over your competition. But if you think about any competition, for example, a horse race, the horse that comes in first gets probably 80% of the winnings. The horse that comes in second gets a little bit, third is barely on the charts, and if you come in fifth, you get nothing but lost time and money. So the point here not is that one strategy is going to make you come in first every time when you're competing for an investor's attention. The point is that if you can just get an inch ahead or 1% ahead of your competitor, which has similar resources to invest, or oftentimes more resources to invest, then that might make all the difference. And coming in second instead of third or fourth might mean the difference in having a very large hedge fund with over $1 billion, over $10 billion in assets, or not getting there and never getting that momentum to really be trusted as a leading institutional hedge fund in your space. One way of becoming more scarce and positioning your fund as more scarce is to limit the types of investors you accept or how many investors you accept. Oftentimes, based on the country you're in, it's already limited. Investors know that. But you can limit it by investor type. You could say, we're really looking with just 3 more family offices to partner with. And due to capacity constraints in the portfolio, we're really just going to work with 3 more family offices. And you can tell a story that genuinely explains why you're doing that, because there are reasons for taking that action. I found this to work pretty well, especially, and only do this if you have a real story of why you're doing that. But if there's a reason to limit how many investors you can work with, then you might as well communicate that. If that's the reality, then just make sure that's communicated either in a conversation or in your marketing materials. One example of someone who uses this strategy that I'm not personally associated with and I get no benefit from promoting is Andrew Lowe. Some of you might recognize him. He basically was very successful in taking his position as a professor and researcher and someone who's often quoted and interviewed on TV, as you see here on Fox Business News in the United States. He's often been on television, journals, magazines, articles. He might be one of the top 3 most cited experts in the hedge fund industry ever. And he's turned that into offering his own line of investment funds, or being an active partner and leader within a business that really profits from his authority in the industry. People trust him. He's a genuine expert. He's a credible expert. He became an expert, and then later, started this line of funds. So it's a great story. If you think about his hero's journey story, he came out on top and probably has a great story about his career and how he got there. So this is an example. I'm going to show you an example from my own experience, but I want to show you another example, just so you don't think this is some weird strategy that just worked for me, but really it was something else that helped me. This is something that really does work well, and lots of hedge fund managers have started to do this, but you can always take it to the next level, as I mentioned before. One of my examples is actually when I was raising capital. I started a website that just shared a few strategies. It was called hedgefundblogger.com, and I basically just shared a few strategies on raising capital. I talked about living in Boston and taking courses at Harvard at the time, and it turns out that nobody really wanted to read about me living in Boston or taking courses at Harvard. They wanted to read about raising capital and how can they raise more capital. So that was interesting. I started writing a few articles a week and then a few a month. Eventually, the website traffic went up to 10,000 visitors to the website every day. At that point, I stopped actively raising capital and instead started the Certified Hedge Fund Professional designation, started doing live workshops and speaking at conferences such as this, offered training programs online, etc. But that transition was really an iterative process of writing those articles online, people that come to me and recognize me somewhat as someone who knows something about capital raising as an expert in the space. That's how I got the book deal with Wiley. And then now people email me asking if they'd like to speak at their conference or come train them personally, etc., or consult with them. And that's just another example that I've experienced firsthand in using this strategy, and it worked really well. So Andrew Lowe is one example. My strategy in starting my current business in capital raising training and hedge fund training is another example. And a third example, which I'll get to in a minute, has to do with wealth management firms. So I'll share that in just 1 minute. Just to show you another way that this can work. But some symbols of authority, obviously clothing, the way you dress affects how people see you and how authoritative and credible you are. Symbols can be anything from, if you are being interviewed at your house and you are in front of a mansion, that can change people's view of you for good or bad. If you do a video on your hedge fund strategy and you do it in your office, which is on a very well-respected street, say Fifth Avenue or Madison Avenue in New York, in Midtown New York, that can give off an impression to global investors that you're in the heart of the action, either in downtown Tokyo or in Singapore or London, showing where you are in your environment you work in, make investors trust you a little bit more. So consider your environment and the symbols of that environment when you're recording video or taking pictures for your team. Publications, if you get published in the Hedge Fund Journal or the Alpha Magazine, or on the Financial Times, those are things which are going to raise your credibility and authority, even if it happens just a few times. It's something you can include in your educational marketing materials. Speaking places, earning professional designations or certifications, you can add that on to your name, makes it a little bit more well-trained in the industry. Then obviously job titles, white papers, and books that you publish can make it look more credible. Most of those things are relatively obvious. I think most of us know how to look authoritative, but I think the strategies and how to do so can be challenging, especially when we're all very busy. And it seems like the best ways to do so is to give away the secrets that your fund is running on. So it's finding that balance of giving away more than your competition and doing more than they're doing, because the more that you give away in terms of educational materials, the more of an expert you'll be seen as in your industry. This is somebody, Joe Polish, who I've done some training with before on marketing and storytelling. I don't have time to go into all of his background here today, but what I want to share is an example of how being a genuine authority is so powerful. So first I'm going to read a quote from a children's book in America, actually. It's a book written mostly for people who are in grade school or 5 or 8 years old. Maybe you might have heard it, called Winnie the Pooh is the book series. So this is a quote from there. And the quote goes, that buzzing noise means something. Now the only reason for making a buzzing noise is that I know of is because you are a bee. And the only reason for being a bee is to make honey. And the only reason for making honey is so I can eat it. So if you think about what it's saying here, the marketing lesson is that if you are trying to be an authority on something you're not, or if you're positioning yourself as an expert on something and you haven't done the hard work behind it, investors are going to know that, and there just won't be a genuine connection with them being able to trust you. So as childlike as this book is, it's a really powerful lesson that if you do the hard work to produce these educational marketing materials yourself, then you'll naturally develop the genuine buzz of someone who is an expert at risk management, or someone who is an expert at trading commodities, or someone who's an expert at managing the portfolio that you run. So in my experience, doing the things that we mentioned right here, and doing them better and stronger and more often than your competition, will naturally generate that natural buzz that maybe other managers don't even try to have, or wish they had. So I think it's just a really important point that you don't want to, say that just because you publish something, you're an expert, and that you claim to be the absolute expert on this. It takes hard work, but the benefits are there if you do it. This last part here, we don't really have time to cover today, but it's really based on the idea that almost anybody can become an expert on something. If you choose a niche topic and you refine it well enough, and you study it long enough, and you study it for 30 minutes or 45 minutes a day, you'll quickly move ahead of the competition in terms of being an expert in that area, and very quickly be recognized as an expert in that area. Most people don't take 30 minutes or 60 minutes every day to learn something new about managing commodities or about managing their portfolio. So if you do that one simple thing, invest 30 minutes a day in reading, writing on your topic, producing educational materials, you'll move past your competition in just 6 or 9 months so quickly that you'll be recognized. Again, this happened with myself. Once I started writing every day in capital raising in my blog, within 5 months, I was invited to speak at the European Business Summit, where there's a few prime ministers speaking. I couldn't believe I was invited, but it was because I had reinvested my time in educational marketing. That same year, I was invited to Moscow to speak at a family office and private banking conference. And it's all because of educational marketing materials. So the stuff really does work, and I hope you try using it in your hedge fund marketing. Second to last idea is the investor avatar domination strategy. The word avatar here is not related to the movie at all. It's really about defining exactly what type of investor you're targeting and then crafting all of your marketing materials to speak directly to them. So if you run a family office and you're trying to attract people that recently sold their business, and you just have this huge influx of cash that they need to manage, then you need to define a customer avatar as someone who just sold their business or they're just about to, and change all of your marketing materials to speak directly to them. The benefits of working with your family office should be custom to them. The reasons why, everything should be targeted on that exact customer profile. If you're a hedge fund manager and you're trying to attract family offices or wealth management firms as investors, and you know you're not going after pension funds or endowments or larger institutions, then everything needs to be customized for those groups. The type of educational marketing materials you provide, the way that you speak with them, how often you meet with them and communicate, all of that should be customized. I don't have time to go into a lot of the custom details here of how to do this, but if you email me, I can send you a copy of my PowerPoint so you can read over these examples. All right, the last strategy here is speed of implementation. This is actually my favorite of all of these strategies, because the truth is if you don't use this strategy, nothing else I spoke here will do you any good, or anything else you learn here at the conference. You probably won't get much benefit from it if you don't use speed of implementation. The definition of speed of implementation is the focus on instantly applying new ideas, lessons, and methods and tools so you get feedback as fast as possible. If you've read Jim Collins' book, it'd be great. He talks about the flywheel and getting that moving slowly at first and getting more momentum and more momentum. This is about getting those revolutions moving quicker and quicker. So if you learn something today, go home, email your assistant tonight about how you're going to do this tomorrow or implement this next week. Take action as fast as possible, because then you'll learn from it, you'll take more action and learn from that. So if you can use a few of these authority building techniques, try one out right away. If it works, try another, and just take as much fast, massive action as possible. You'll just learn much quicker and evolve much faster than your competition. For example, the way this works is that oftentimes in business and marketing and capital raising, we can see steps A, B, and C. That's obvious. But we might not take action until we can see steps D, E, F, G, H, all the way to T, because T might be that huge success period. And if you only can see steps A, B, and C, you might not be sure about what to do. You might not take action on what you learned here today or what you're going to learn tomorrow. So speed of implementation works well, because if you know steps A, B, and C, you take them very quickly. By the time you're in step C, step D, E, and F will be obvious, and you can take quick action on those as well. Whereas if you always wait until the full path of how to market to a certain type of investor is obvious, it might be too late, and you might not get the value from that. So take fast action, and you'll be rewarded. I did this in the wealth management space. I created white papers for wealth management firms and RIA networks. That attracted them to me, and they formed partnerships with me where I would educate some of their wealth manager or relationship managers. And by doing that, the wealth management relationship managers would come to me, and I would make $400,000 and $500,000 sales and raising capital because I've taken fast action in using educational marketing in my capital raising. So that pretty much sums up my presentation for today. Again, if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, feel free to email me. I'll put my email address up here in 2 seconds. Here's the free websites I run. It has over 5,000 articles you can read entirely for free, open to the public. Here's our 2 most popular products and services: the Certified Hedge Fund Professional designation, CHP, and our website, familyoffices.com, where we sell investor contact details. And then here's my email address. Our offices are based in Portland, Oregon, in the United States on the West Coast, and also in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And my email address is just richard@hedgefundgroup.org. And that's it. Thanks for your attention.